Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November General Meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Cheryl Gannon, and I'm the president. We will begin, as always, with our routine business. First is approval of the agenda, which was published on page 2 of the newsletter online. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The agenda is approved. Next is approval of the minutes of the October general membership meeting, which were printed on page 6 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The minutes are approved. Next is the treasurer's report. Jerry Garson is our treasurer. You can go ahead, Jerry.
We operate on a fiscal year starting July 1st through November 10th, which is today. We have membership dues of $1,368. We've had expenses of $720. And our net income for the period is $648. Our current bank balance is $6,336. If there are any questions, please contact me.
That's great. We will save announcements until after our speaker presentation. So I'm going to
Do
call
we
in.
want to even do this?
I'm going to please mute yourselves, people. I'm going to turn this now over to Joyce Gwads, our first vice president, to introduce the speakers.
Hello, everyone. Our topic tonight is the Montgomery County Schools with participants Lyric Winick, Ricky Riberio, and Dr. Peter Morgan. Lyric and Ricky are two engaged parents with a deep knowledge of our school system. Lyric has been a PTSA president throughout the BCC cluster, and Ricky recently has been a PTSA president throughout as president at Kennedy High School. Both have followed the developments around the new regional school and boundary models, as well as school safety, budget, and related matters. Dr. Moran is chief of the Division of School Leadership and Improvement, a position he has held for 2 years. He has been with MCPS for 22 years, including in prior positions as a teacher, assistant principal, and area superintendent. Lyric and Ricky will discuss their understanding of issues facing MCPS, followed by Dr. Moran's views of issues raised, discussion among the three, and a period for questions. We welcome Lyric Winick, Ricky Ribeiro, and Dr. Peter Moran.
Hey, thank you so much, Joyce. So I'm really happy to be here with Ricky, and it's nice to have Dr. Moran here as well. We all go way back and know each other. I don't think we've ever done a three-way presentation, but there's a first time for everything. I am no longer an MCPS parent, but both of my boys went through the system from kindergarten through graduation at BCC High School in the BCC cluster. And I was involved in each of their schools to varying degrees, PTSA president in an elementary, middle school, and high school level. And I'm, happy to talk with Ricky, and I are going to talk to you about some of the issues and things that we see. We both testified before the Board of Education. We're still, very connected in our communities. Ricky is a current MCPS parent and also has graduate. And anyway, we're really happy to be here, and we're happy to have your questions and sort of give you a big picture overview. If you're not currently in MCPS, it is something that impacts you as a taxpayer. It's about half the county budget, and they need a little more than that. So it has a big impact on your pocketbook and everything else. And if you don't know, this is a great opportunity to learn. So Ricky, join me, unmute.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having us here. So I'm a native son of Montgomery County, born and raised in the county. I was a graduate of Watkins Mill High School. I believe Dr. Moran and I had that in common. And in full disclosure, Dr. Moran was actually my son's elementary school principal. My son graduated, as Lyric mentioned, from Kennedy High School last year, where I was the PTA president. I am currently now the cluster, one of three cluster coordinators. I also do advocacy with another organization called the Black Coalition for Excellence in Education, where I advocate specifically for Black parents and students and staff. I am excited to talk with you all about the things that I've learned, obviously, and make sure that you all understand as county residents and taxpayers what's going on with the school system. Of course, I am sharing my perspective as a parent, and you will get to hear Dr. Moran's as somebody who works for the school system. Lyric, I don't know if you're ready for me to just pull up the presentation
Yeah,
at this
let's
point.
we're gonna throw up a few slides so you get to look at them as not just at us all the time. And we want to say too, I mean, there are a lot of excellent things about MCPS, excellent teachers, excellent leaders, excellent students, a lot of students who are very hungry for an education. And so, it's not that there is nothing going right in the system. There are lots of things that go right. There are some good numbers and great numbers in terms of where the schools stand compared to the rest of Maryland in state rankings and things like that. But I don't think you would all be here and we wouldn't have 2 hours to talk if everything were perfect. So we're going to hit some of the high points of concern or unease. And we're going to talk about this, I guess, if we go to the next slide, kind of going with Dr. Taylor's theme of trying to use cute things and cute animals. I went with the Halloween photo of my dog. So these are the three super scaries. We have three witches and my poor dog who had a little minor surgery, so was in a cone, so looked a little bit more forlorn than usual. But there are three issues that we're going to dig down a little bit tonight in our discussion, and that I think are really relevant for all of you, which is that MCPS, and this is a decades old problem. It is not, I want to be clear, like Dr. Taylor, who has been on the superintendent duty for a little over a year, and some of the other leadership who are newer, this is not necessarily something that started under, it didn't start under them. And in many cases, I don't even think they were aware of the scope until a major audit was done over the past year. But MCPS has an infrastructure problem. It needs 5.15 billion total is the estimate. There's a 2.7 billion ask right now for basic construction and maintenance. And when we say basic, we mean basic. It is there is a lot of money in there that needs to go to replacing roofs and making HVAC systems work. I believe there are 40 of the MCPS buildings that do not have functional HVACs or have very problematic HVACs. Many of those are schools with mold problems, etc. So we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about the regional model and the boundary changes plans for changing both how MCPS works and who's in what cluster. And sort of little spoiler alert, Vicky already knows that I have very strong opinion about something related to this and how these two things integrate with each other. And then finally, the third super scary is school climate and safety. That probably one of the things that you all are most familiar with, our local news leading with some sort of fight, lockdown, violence, gunshot, etc., at an MCPS school. And so we'd like to talk to you about that and kind of give you our perspective as parents who have been in schools that have made the news perhaps more than anybody would have liked. So with that, with our three super scaries and my cute little dog Cree, I guess we can go to the next slide. So Ricky, you want to talk a little bit about infrastructure, and I can talk a little bit about infrastructure, just
Yeah.
what the problems are, what the issues are, and kind of how we got here.
Yeah, sure. So, I will say again, having been a native son of Montgomery County, I'm familiar with many of the high schools and the buildings, and I would say As a parent, having my kids go through the system, it was shocking how many of the schools looked exactly at like they had looked when I was in them. When my son was at John F. Kennedy High School last year, we had a number of issues that were related to infrastructure and construction, and it disrupted learning many times. And I'll start with the most significant impact of decaying and crumbling infrastructure, which is disruption of learning. So last year I can't remember exactly, it was toward the spring um, part of the school year last year. We had pipe issues at John F. Kennedy High School, and it closed the school for 1 to 2 days because of the pipe issues. And previously, when we were doing the addition to the school, as they were adding that addition to Kennedy High School, there was a gas leak because, as they were doing construction, they struck the wrong thing, and then the school had to be evacuated, and then students missed instruction for the rest of that day. And they tried to resume instruction, but the gas smell was so intense that kids were complaining of headaches, and they were calling parents to go home. So this, and I will give Dr. Taylor credit here. He's been pretty honest about the neglect and the lack of and the amount of deferred maintenance that has happened to the school system, and it's showing up in many schools, some more than others. I spoke about Kennedy because those were my firsthand experiences, but what you see here, I believe, is either from Quince Orchard.
Yes.
I think it's Quince Orchard High School,
Yep.
where they recently had some, I don't even know if I'm guessing pipe issues because it's water, but obviously coming from the ceiling, which is not where you want that coming. Magruder has had issues. Wooten has been a community that has spoken out a lot about its infrastructure issues. Sims, Silver Spring International Middle School has also had a lot of construction issues, which is one of the reasons why it's currently being discussed for potential closure because of their infrastructure issues. So our school infrastructure is decaying, and it's decaying in ways that are impacting the learning environment and safety and health, which Lyric, I'll let you talk about the mold and the other things that you have on here.
Yeah, so I also put up some video that's exactly Quince Orchard. That's the ceiling tile coming down and the water running out. And in other schools, predominantly because of some of the HVAC issues, if you know how hot and humid it gets in Washington, D.C., it's not a surprise that there's black mold growing on a lot of surfaces. But this is a terrible thing for classrooms with teachers, students, offices with administrators. It even extends to the school warehouse, which is built out of World War II surplus Quonset huts, which is like something that you would expect to see in a textbook, not necessarily housing supplies for MCPS. So I think that there are really, really substantial problems. My understanding in terms of doing a little bit of research on how this happened is that, there have been some issues in terms of the Department of School Construction that predate the current leadership, and also just with previous superintendents. So sometimes the superintendents looked around and they were like, "Oh, the county council has X amount of money to give us, so I'm going to do a budget that reflects that money." And they didn't really have a systematic way to handle repairs. They pretty much, it was kind of like duct tape and bubble gum and hope. And they clearly didn't do what, most homeowners or HOAs or, a condo association would do, which is come up with a list of yearly maintenance issues, long-term repairs, and kind of prioritize. So there are also issues around the way the funding works because the funding for infrastructure is done through a different process than the school budget. It's something called the SIP, and it is supposed to have a 6-year time horizon, but there are just lots of issues with the way the money is allocated, and the process that it goes through. The Board of Education was also not inquisitive enough. It's sort of for all the construction and other projects that were on board starting after COVID that needed to be done. I think any of us who has done any home repairs or renovations is well aware that the prices skyrocketed with inflation. Somehow, miraculously, MCPS seemed to be in a bubble, and they were the only ones where, when they budgeted for a project, they did not put in sort of an inflationary index. Their costs miraculously were supposed to hold steady, and of course, we know that hasn't happened. So the end result of all of this is this very, very large ask. It has not worked its way through the system yet. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions from the county council. I'm sure there will be some from the Board of Ed. And, the biggest issue of all, which affects all of us, is how are we going to pay for it? It's basically something to the effect of about $10,000 additional that will be required of every, property owning household. So if you own a house, I think that's about the math. I mean, you're going to be asked for quite an additional revenue share to cover these costs. And it's unclear how it's going to work. There have been some suggestions of public-private partnerships, but this is a real challenge. So this is from a financial perspective, from a health perspective, and from a functioning perspective, this is one of the biggest issues that is confronting MCPS and the county. Just to give you a sense, the entire county budget is over a little over $7 billion. So to be $5 billion short on infrastructure is a huge number in the context of Montgomery County. Okay, Ricky, let's go to the
And I
next.
want to add,
Yeah.
just because it'll dovetail into the next section, which is all of these questions about how much money to invest in infrastructure are also happening as we are seeing significant declines in enrollment. And frankly, numbers and proposals around the buildings that we're building are happening in real time. So many of you have probably heard about two new high schools that are being built, one of which is currently serving as a holding school for Northwood High School while its building is being rebuilt, the other being Crown High School in Gaithersburg. And more recently, in one of the CIP meetings, Dr. Taylor floated the idea of potentially not using Crown as a new high school, but as a holding school to rebuild other high schools such as Wooten, Magruder, and Damascus, which are in desperate need of new buildings. But all of that is a question mark when we don't know how many kids will fill all these buildings and if we need all the buildings and if we might need to close more schools because Dr. Taylor also said that the announced potential closures of Sligo Creek Elementary and Sims are not the only ones that will be happening and that others will likely follow. And with that, I'll go to the next one, which ties right into that, which is regional program study and boundary study. And Lyric, I'll tee this up and then let you join in afterward. But this has been a bit of a tangled web to follow because initially the boundary study, which was necessary to open the two new high schools I mentioned, Woodward High School and Crown High School, were needed because those high schools needed to be filled with students, and that would obviously need to readjust the boundaries for existing schools. The regional program model was initially a parallel thing that was happening, but more recently we have been told by the system that they are intertwined and must be done together. And so the regional program model is changing the conversation because in essence you're going to have what I would call, I know MCPS disagrees, but I would call them super boundaries because what was going to happen is I will use my daughter. My daughter's a middle schooler at Odessa Shannon Middle School, and she's going to be the first class impacted as a current seventh grader. Previously, as a student in Odessa Shannon Middle School, her home school would have been Kennedy, but she would have had access to four other high schools via something called the Down County Consortium, which basically gave students a level of school choice where they could choose or they could list in order of preference any of the five high schools that make up the Down County Consortium. And hopefully, they try to say you'll get your first choice. If not your first choice, you'll definitely get your second choice and hopefully your third choice. But that lottery system has been in place for the Down County Consortium. And then the other one is the Northeast County Consortium for over 20 years. And so, for me as a parent, I was really looking forward to my daughter potentially going to Northwood High School, which is close to our house and would have been a brand new building. But with the regional program model, Northwood is now in a different MCPS region, and so she will not have access to Northwood High School. She will now instead have access to, her homeschool will continue to be Kennedy. She could potentially apply to programs at Wheaton High School, Walter Johnson High School, and the soon to be open Woodward High School, which is currently a holding school for Northwood High School. The number of seats for her that will be available are uncertain. The way the selection process is going to work is uncertain, and there are an incredible amount of questions about transportation because traveling, let's say if my daughter was to apply to one of the programs at Woodward or Walter Johnson, I live again right next door to Kennedy. Getting her to those high schools would be obviously it would be a concern. And so those are questions that many community members have had, and there's been a lot of dissatisfaction on the answers we've gotten thus far from MCPS. And Lyric, I'll let you take it from there.
So if right now you feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, that is basically how parents are feeling in the different communities. What this regional model does is it divides the MCPS schools into 6 different districts of, depending on, what your high school number is, it's like 4 or 5. So I will give you an example. In fact, Northwood, which Ricky just mentioned, happens to fall under the regional model in the BCC Blair Whitman Einstein Northwood region. So I'm going to try to take a step back and give you my thought as someone who sat on the original committee to re-envision Woodward years ago when it was decided that they were going to renovate and reopen Woodward. And then also on the Silver Creek Middle School boundary study when the BCC cluster had to split to have a second middle school. I look at this and I look at the boundary study model and the conflation of boundary study and regional model. And I agree with Ricky's characterization of a super boundary. If I were MCPS, I think what I would have preferred to say to parents, because this is really how, when I sit back and I look at it, I see it, saying, you know what? We inherited from the process of building these 2 new high schools, and one is, up county, one is down county. We inherited this boundary study model. We've periodically had these boundary studies, never at this scale, but we've reassigned students when we've had changes in enrollment, school openings, things like that. Here's the good news, families. We are now setting aside the boundary study process. You will not live with the uncertainty of boundary study ever again after we get through this. Yes, we're going to have to shift some boundaries, particularly around the elementary schools, which are really imbalanced with some very overcrowded and some underutilized. But basically, we inherited a boundary study model. We don't love boundary study as a way to go about education. So we've stepped in and we're creating a new model called a regional model. And what we're going to do is we are going to group schools together. And our viewpoint is that when these schools are grouped, we used to have individual clusters. Now, when we put 4 or 5 schools together, what's essentially going to happen is we're going to deal with overcrowding or underutilization by essentially trying to rearrange the deck chairs. I won't use the Titanic metaphor, but rearrange the deck chairs and so we can take the pressure off individual schools. We can sort of finesse things. We can entice students if BCC is really overcrowded, we can entice students to go to Whitman or to go to Blair or vice versa. So that gives us a lot more flexibility. It lets you know when you buy a house and you settle in a location with your family that you're not going to have your school boundary change ever again because you're part of this regional model. And it also gives you a lot of access, and this is the idea behind it. It's going to give you access to programs that in certain cases were either limited to certain sections of the county or limited to certain schools, or it's trying to create a more equitable distribution of resources across MCPS. So this sounds like a great pitch, and I really wish that this is the pitch MCPS had made. The slight little problem with this pitch, which is not so little, is that it's happening very fast and very furious. It's conflated with this boundary study, which is very anxiety provoking for many reasons for a lot of parents. Just opening a new middle school was torturous on the BCC community. And, that is not an overstatement. And then there's the question that Ricky raised of transportation, and another question that's also very vital. If you're offering up these programs, how are you going to staff them? How are you going to make sure that they're actually comparable across these different regions? And I'm going to give you a small example of where I'm a little concerned that they haven't done the sort of due diligence that would help in terms of persuading the communities that this will work. So in the BCC cluster, and it's not known as the BCC cluster, but in the region where BCC falls, Einstein High School is one of the schools. MCPS in the regional plan has designated Einstein for as a music magnet, basically, in the performing arts arc. So Einstein would be where the premier music program is that you would want to go to. Well, sounds great on paper, but the fact is that BCC High School has like the top music program in many of the county schools. It has a phenomenal teaching staff that's geared towards music. Its students go and win awards at national competitions. They win the national competitions. It has a very deep parent-centered music booster program that allows all of this to happen. They go compete in Nashville, in Boston, I mean, everywhere. Like you've probably heard the BCC jazz band play at events around the county. They've played at the Capitol. It is a phenomenal, phenomenal program. So the question becomes, like, what parent at BCC is going to send their music student to Einstein for the music program when it exists at BCC? Or do you gut the BCC music program? Do you try to involuntarily transfer the teachers who have made the BCC music program what it is to Einstein? How is any of this going to work? And what do you do about the booster component, which is absolutely vital, excuse me, to the success of this program? So that's where I'm not sure the dive has been deep enough. And I've heard from quite a number of Einstein parents who are really worried because they're like, look, our boundaries are shrinking already with how we're defined in this region. Be realistic here. If you're choosing between BCC, Blair, and Whitman, plus Einstein and Northwood, who's going to want to send their kid to Einstein voluntarily? All the top Einstein kids are going to try to go to BCC, Blair, and Whitman if they can manage the transportation. So that's on a sort of micro level, some of these anxieties that are being felt across the communities at these schools. And I think that's why you see the request for a pause from the Education Association. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez has also asked for a pause and more clarification. And I think this is going to be the real struggle. It's not that the regional model is a bad idea. And I've actually always thought that MCPS would function a lot better if it were broken up into at least 4 regions. It's that we don't see enough planning, forethought, and explanation put in here, and the sort of due diligence that needs to be done, and is making everybody anxious. And I wish they would have just kind of gotten rid of the boundary study component, because I think that this is dividing people's attention and concern, and they don't know what to be worried about first. And I don't see that, once this is done, that there'll ever be another boundary study. And I think that would have been a better headline to lead with. But, those are just my opinions from like 15 years of watching this process play out.
I'll also say some other reasons for the opposition. So, in addition to the MCEA, which is a teachers union, recently putting out their press release, MCCPTA had put a resolution forth to their body, and they similarly said the same thing. And several of the MCCPTA members were involved in what is called the Design Opportunity Team, who was supposed to be consulting with MCPS on the rollout of this model. I'll also say that there has been a recent attempt at regionalization of programs that has not worked out, in my opinion. And I say that because my son was part of that program. So the idea of expanding the IB model, the IB model at Richard Montgomery High School, which is a highly renowned, highly valued countywide magnet program, at different regional high schools, and MCPS has been a thing that was in the works over the last 5 years. And so Kennedy was one of the spots, Springbrook and Watkins Mill. Those were the three regional IB program sites that were developed and launched 5 years ago. I went through the program at Kennedy, and it was not equal to Richard Montgomery High School. And I'm not saying that just from a qualitative perspective as a parent. You can look at the outcomes in terms of how kids are doing on the IB exams, and also the outcomes that they're getting. They don't match what Richard Montgomery has. And so the question for me and for many other parents is like, if you couldn't scale one program to three different sites, how are you going to do that multiple times over with six different regions and without significant time, resources, and budget going against it? The other thing is this regional model takes away some things from people, and whenever you take things away from people, they get anxious and angry. And so there's a lot of parents who, in the Down County Consortium, who are upset that the Down County Consortium is being dismantled because parents weren't consulted. They weren't surveyed on if they wanted the Down County Consortium to go away. It was merely and we found out after the fact that it was going to be dissolved after questions and queries of like, well, wait, you can't have this and the Down County Consortium, so what's going to happen? And finally, MCPS admitted it would go away. The other thing is the countywide magnets. There are several school communities that have rich history of their countywide magnet programs, namely the ones at Blair, excuse me, have multiple, Poolsville and Richard Montgomery IB, which I had already discussed. And so those communities are really upset about losing the countywide component because they believe that being able to draw kids from across the county is what makes those programs special. And also the teachers who have developed the curriculum, the relationships in the program potentially being broken up and sent to different schools is what has many families and community members concerned.
Yeah, and the scaling up is a really important point, and kind of what happens also to like AP programs at some of these schools. There's a lot of issues around it, and I think this actually ties back to infrastructure. Like if you are struggling to handle things like your HVAC system and when you need to repair a roof, how are you going to be able, it is the same overall team that's doing this. How are you going to be able to implement this massive restructuring? Because that is what it is. And, it might have been something that would have been better to make as two regions as a pilot and see where the problems are, see how the transportation works, see how the after school activities and sports and other things work, like rolling it out across the county simultaneously. I know, you want to be equitable, but sometimes it's better to be slow and right than fast and wrong. So on that, I think because we don't want to totally run out the clock here, let's move to safety. Ricky, I'm going to let you start since you're
Yeah.
you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, safety is how I got into advocacy and is how I met Lyric because we were both parents that were seeing concerning safety issues at our children's schools, and then we traded notes and ended up testifying at the Board of Education together. There's a lot that's been happening with safety and the spirit of time and getting through this part and getting to conversation. There's a lot that's been happening at schools that I would say weren't happening, or certainly weren't happening at the level and volume that are currently being seen. I won't read all of the headlines, but I will say the headline on the left is personal. My daughter goes to this school where this student was injured, serious injury, after an incident where he was struck in the head by a metal object with another student. And the parents have a lot of questions and concern. And Odessa Shannon Middle School is a school that's had a number of safety incidents that have made honestly a lot of parents avoid the school. And so one of my main reasons for pressing MCPS on improving its safety is that it impacts community connection. It impacts parent willingness to send their children to school. The number one thing you care about as a parent when you hand your children over to the school system is that they are safe, that they are not put in harm's way. And unfortunately, as a parent, I cannot say that that has been my experience because my son went to a high school where there was a peer who died of a fentanyl overdose. There were multiple overdoses that happened in the high school. There was a student who entered the building with a knife to attack another student. There was a lockdown last year where there was reports of students with a gun in the building. It is terrifying, and it is terrifying to be as a parent on the other end when my son is texting me, Dad, what's going on? Why is there a lockdown? What do you know what's happening? Do you know if we're safe? And I know that that's happened at many other schools, and BCC included, because BCC had several notable lockdowns that also happened as well. And I'll also note, Montgomery County Public Schools had its first in-school shooting with the Magruder incident in 2022. So the safety landscape has changed. I will argue that Montgomery County Public Schools has not evolved to meet the modern threat landscape. It has not collaborated with community stakeholders. It has oftentimes evaded and avoided difficult conversations where I feel like courageous conversations would have maybe mitigated or at least made people feel that MCPS was looking to solve the problem rather than avoiding the conversation. But this is an ongoing topic. It's an ongoing problem for public schools, and it's one that MCPS, in my opinion, has yet to resolve satisfactorily.
Yeah, I just want to tag onto that and say that while there are a lot of incidents that grab headlines and local news coverage, I think the other problem is the sort of low-level safety concerns and violence that kids are exposed to every day, whether it's fighting in the hall, fighting outside of the boundaries of school. Just I mean, and these are real fights. I mean, I have to say that, my younger son goes to school in Chicago and he's exposed to far less violence, like almost none in the city of Chicago, even though, he has people on campus whom he knows who have been like mugged and things like that, than he was on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis at BCC. And it's kind of shocking, but he's like, yeah, it's much more relaxed. I'm really not worried because, like I know what to do and nothing's going to happen to me. And I really do agree with him because he knows where to go and not go. And there was just much more in your face. And unfortunately, this has not diminished to the degree that it should have, even accounting for getting further away from COVID, things like that. There is also one other issue that I would bring up that I think maybe people in this Zoom would be familiar with, that there is an MCPS philosophy. MCPS is two philosophies. One, the school is in loco parentis. So when students are in school, the school is in charge. They are acting as the parent. But when the students step 1 millimeter off the campus, all of a sudden that in loco parentis moniker drops. So if there are fights or other altercations, things like that, that happen outside of school grounds, MCPS really waives responsibility. And, at BCC, that became a shooting in a park where fortunately nobody was hit last spring. It's been multiple fights. It's been, drug dealing as well, drug use in the stairwells of apartment buildings and garages in Bethesda, all sorts of things like that. And I personally think that the school needs to have another look here and say, look, if we're going to be responsible within the boundaries of the school, especially during the school day, we have to bear some burden of responsibility outside of the boundaries as well and insist upon this, have procedures and deal with this accordingly and not just wash our hands of this and have this go out into the community. So, and I think that when Ricky talks about the courageous conversations, we have to involve parents, we have to involve students. And when these incidents happen, we have to be honest about them. That's the one thing that is consistently missing is the honest conversation and the conversation that includes all the students. BCC has no ability space-wise to bring all its students together for an assembly. Every time there's been a lockdown or serious violence, that was like the one plea, please talk to the kids. It did not happen. I'm hoping that there will be changes in the system where that will not be the norm, but sadly it too often is. So we've given you a fire hose. These are our two choices. My dog is back because I thought we should look at something a little better for the end. So we have two choices. You all do because this is your school, whether or not you have students there. Every single one of you is a stakeholder in this system. Again, it is one of the reasons that people used to move to the county. It is less so. I have neighbors who have moved out of the area because they did not want to send their kids to school. I have neighbors who have moved here for school who have decided to send their kids to private school, including one who's pulling their child mid-year. So you have two choices. You can be like Cree on the left. You can be like Cree barking and whining, or you can be like Cree on the right and be thoughtful and engage and try to repair this system. But it is going to take all of us, parents, non-parents, everybody, every single one of you is a stakeholder. And it is really, we this is something that this is not too big to fail. This cannot fail. Too many families, too many children, too much of our community depends on our schools.
I am muted. I'm sorry. That was fantastic, actually. I think that's one of our most informative programs ever. But we are going to move to the next phase and turn the floor over to Dr. Moran.
Thank you very much. That'll be tough to follow. I do have a little presentation to run through myself.
Okay.
Let's see here. But before I start, I just to share a little bit about myself, and Ricky and Lyric both alluded to it, but just to give some background on me. So I would say I probably have one of the more unique perspectives when it comes to Montgomery County because first off, my parents, my grandparents came here in 1948. In 1948, my grandfather became a math teacher, which was at Rockville Middle School at the time. My grandmother became an English teacher and taught in Montgomery County Public Schools for 45 years. Then my grandfather also was the principal at Wheaton High School. He was my daycare provider. I got dropped off there a lot of times after school and ran the hallways of Wheaton High School. And similar to what Ricky just shared, Wheaton High School was just recently rebuilt. And so when I was, 5, that school looked exactly the same as when I was 35. He is certainly spot on with that. After that, my mom became a teacher. She taught kindergarten for 40 years in Montgomery County Public Schools. I became a teacher myself in the Watkins Mill cluster at Whetstone Elementary School, where Ricky and I both attended high school at Watkins Mill. I coached football at Watkins Mill when I started teaching. I then met my wife as a teacher. She's a special education teacher, and I'm a parent in the Einstein community. So someone in my immediate family has worked for Montgomery County Public Schools for the last 78 years. It has been a constant conversation at our table about the good, the bad, the opportunities for change, for success. I have a very unique perspective when we talk about these things, and I try to always separate being the chief of schools, being the parent to two boys who are in the Einstein cluster and are impacted by the boundary study, being the husband of a special education teacher when we have a lot of special education issues going on in our county. So I would say my perspective on this is rather unique, but just wanted to give you a little bit of background. One of the most rewarding jobs that I've had, not the most rewarding job I've ever had is being a principal. And I'll frame this, when we start talking about a lot of the safety and security things. Recently, I was having a conversation with a mentor, and I was talking about, my interest or my passion of being a principal and wanting to one day go back to that. And the person said to me, "It's not the same principalship." As kind of sad as that was, it was also kind of, eye-opening when we talk about some of the problems in education that have come after 2020. It is a different landscape. I wanted to start kind of just with a positive, just to frame some of the work that's being done. So we just recently, about 2 weeks ago, and some of you may have read about it, got our report card results. And we had 26 schools that increased at least 1 star across our county. For those of you that don't have a background, the MSD report card scores students, and every student in your school that takes the Maryland assessment in English literacy, in math, it measures attendance, it measures culture and climate. And so we saw that increase, and we're over half of our schools right now that have 4 or 5 school stars. I think the last one is one of the biggest ones to me is we're not moving backwards. It's the first time in since the MSD report card where we've had no school that decreased a star. So none of our schools are moving backwards. We certainly have a considerable amount of work. Some of the schools that were just mentioned by Lyric and Ricky are a daily focus, and quite frankly, are schools that often keep me up at night. We have a tremendous amount of work to do, but I just present that to you to say that we're looking forward to positive momentum. A big reason for positive momentum, and touches a little bit on all of the things that were shared relative to safety instruction, is we rolled out cross-functional teams this year. Our cross-functional teams are intended to shrink down the size of our school system and ensure that schools get timely, responsive support that's based on data. Each of these teams has a director who leads or coordinates the team. It has a special education coordinator and an instructional specialist, someone who specializes in literacy or English, math, a staffing coordinator specific for those schools, a safety and security coordinator, an equity specialist, and an English language development specialist. I'm happy to share with you, I just touched on the special education component. Dr. Taylor made the largest investment in special education staffing in the history of Montgomery County Public Schools. We have seen an impact on increasing staffing, have a tremendous amount of work to do in special education. We also have a lot of work to do around the compliance component. There has been, I would say, when you look at the United States, an over-identification of students to receive special education services as a result of coming out of the pandemic, and that lapse in learning, and them, students being assigned sometimes an IEP, not necessarily appropriately. One other thing just to share, and Mr. Riberio touched on this too, was the safety and security component. We have shrunk down the size and the caseload that our safety and security coordinators have. Currently, right now, we have Kennedy, Watkins Mill, and Gaithersburg, who have a one coordinator for their clusters, which is the first time that we've done something, a model like that in our school system's history. So we've definitely shrunken down the footprint. A lot of work that continues to need to be done around safety and security. This is of cross-functional teams. One of the big pieces that you've heard a lot about in terms of, we've heard about it, academic performance. We've heard about it in terms of safety and security. We've heard about it in terms of, the community is what I believe has been diluted expectations since 2020. Expectations have been lowered for adults. Expectations have been lowered for students. Expectations, I think, have been lowered in many ways for communities. And we have been working very hard to try to change the paradigm when it comes to expectations in our school system. We started off with this slide at the beginning of the year about having just very clear expectations for our students. Every one of our students at the beginning of this school year received an orientation at the middle and high school level, and then a more age-appropriate way at the elementary school level to talk through what were the expectations for them academically, what were the expectations for them in terms of their character and conduct. And so that was where we started the year. One of the places that we started on was safety and security. I had this conversation with Lyric, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this, but our language around safety and security has varied over the past decade. People have had different interpretations of different words. There has not been a well-coordinated response with our police partners, where our police partners had different verbiage for things. And when people are using different vocabulary, confusion happens, and we don't respond as quickly and as effectively for our students. This year, we rolled out a standard response protocol, ran this through all of our principals, all of our staff, all of our students to get this common language in place. I think it's been, well received. It is, I will say, it's from the I Love You Guys Foundation. It is very simple. And I think, what we really need is to get out of being extremely complex around safety and security, identify what works well, do it consistently across all of our schools, and stay out of really trying to make things highly technical. I think we got some places where we tried to be highly technical, and we had failed essentially in our communities in several instances. The next piece is our code of conduct. Just want to give you guys just a quick update on this. The code of conduct is revised every school year. We revised it this school year. I've been asked some questions around in some other meetings around collaboration with parents, collaboration with community members around the code of conduct. I'm going to be very transparent with you. There is not a need to collaborate around common sense, and I'll give you an example of this. For our code of conduct, for an attack on a teacher, we had levels 1 through 5 for that. You could be a teacher could interpret that as they were in charge of administering the consequences for being attacked. Arson, which is a felony, was a level 1 through 5. Calling it a bomb threat to a school was a level 1 through 5. That is inappropriate and certainly doesn't demonstrate high expectations for our students. We took out those level 1s and 2s on a lot of those things that have been occurring. And just so everyone's aware, and we talk about the impact that our facilities have on instruction. Last year alone, I believe we had 59 swatting incidents occur across our school system, where some MCPS students, some students out of state, called in bomb threats, where students had to be evacuated from their schools, sometimes for hours, sometimes for the entire school day. And that ranged from a level 1 to 5 if an MCPS student did that. So that's what I mean around, not necessarily collaborating around those commonsensical pieces. Collaborating around the implementation of it is critical. We've been talking with a lot of the students around how they're seeing this play out in their schools. I just want to share some data with you. This is the first September 30th through, so the first month's data right here. You will notice an increase of suspensions by 66. Honestly, I thought it would be more significant than that, given the change in expectations. You will notice in the Hispanic Latino portion right there, an increase from 93 to 150. We've been very engaged in that increase and having conversations with community partners internally, talking about it. One of the things that has come out, and I know is a community issue, the one that we all have started to not necessarily encounter in the news, but encounter personally, has been the impact of the presence of ICE in our school communities and how we're going to respond to that. We've debriefed a lot of those suspensions with some of those students, and those students are going through a lot of trauma, a lot of unpredictability in their lives, in a lot of cases where they are may have had a loved one who has been deported. So wanted to share that with you. Cell phone policy. So again, we talked about safety and security. There is a safety and security component that links directly to this. We have seen a decrease in school violence in our schools. And we have seen actually, because I think, Ricky was a part of this at Kennedy. We've seen a decrease in suspensions at Kennedy High School. We've seen a significant decrease in serious incidents. Leadership matters. And we are really working hard to ensure that every principal is operationally strong, has high expectations for safety and security. When I talk to principals around their academic results or around safety and security, they point to this as a very, that they can draw a correlation between an increase in math performance, a decrease in safety and security. At the elementary and middle school, it's away all day for cell phones. At the high school, it's away in the classroom. They can utilize them at lunch and during classroom transitions. I've seen that our students at first were very, I would say, upset about not having access to something when we know that like digital addiction is a real thing. And probably many of us on this call feel like we need to have our phones with us. I would say that our students have been very responsive to this, have taken responsibility, and have seen the impact around engagement of themselves and their peers within the classroom. Just to talk a little bit about grading and reporting, we raised the expectations for grading and reporting. We We really looked at what we had in place around the 50% rule of students having access to the 50% and the way that that impacted our student attendance, which is also a safety and security issue. So essentially, if you got a C your first quarter in high school, you could not come to class your second quarter at all, and you would pass the class. So a C and an E would equal a D. We saw significant chronic absenteeism in our second and fourth quarter. We've gone back to a percentage-based grading system where it's not possible to get a C and an E and pass a course. Those types of things have significant consequences when you implement them. We are in quarter one of implementation. We have absolutely seen an impact on students where it's going to be difficult for them to recover during the second quarter. So we are looking at expanding credit recovery for our high schools and having conversations around the implications of increasing the expectations around grading and reporting. I will stop there. It's 8 o'clock. I talked for about 20 minutes, which is a lot. Actually, yeah, 20 minutes, which is a lot. So I'll let us get into a discussion. And I don't know how, Cheryl, Joyce, if you'd like this to work with Lyric, Ricky, and I having a discussion or just a whole group discussion.
I think we have allocated about 10 minutes for the three of you to have a discussion.
Okay, great.
All right. Ricky, do you have a thing?
Followed by questions from the group.
Yeah. Do you have something? Do you have something that you're burning to ask or?
I guess to ask Peter or to
to talk.
Okay.
Yeah, raise
I think I would say one thing I would just point out in the code of conduct updates, because that was a topic of concern in the community. I think, Peter, the examples you gave, I agree, right? Like the very serious incidents make sense to reduce the variability on the range of consequences. What I have not heard satisfactorily answered and what I think is caused a lot of concerns is those lower level categories where there's a lot more subjectivity. For example, excessive talking. If a student is suspended for that, what is the criteria? Do we trust the teacher to be the one that's implementing that criteria? Disrespect, disrupting the classroom. I will say anecdotally, this is anecdotal evidence, so I'm not using, quantitative, but like in Bethesda or Potomac School, a child who disrupts the classroom might not get consequenced as severely as a child in a majority minority school, where the teacher maybe is a different race and they might have a harsher punishment. So those are the concerns I heard more from the community around the code of conduct. It wasn't the serious categories that you said, but it's those subjective ones, which are backed by research for disparities in outcomes that a lot of the community was concerned about.
Yeah, and so and you're spot on, and I think so we've been tracking. They're categorized as disrespect and as disruption in the code of conduct, and looking at the number of suspensions, if any, and frankly, as a former principal, I don't think that any of those should lead to a suspension. Just want to put that out there. So hear you on that, and also just one of the things that I've really appreciated and has been certainly a huge change from my previous experiences in Montgomery County is having all of this data available to the public by school, by category, by cluster, so that we can start to really have some open conversations about the patterns of how we use exclusionary practices for students, but specifically for students of color. So I appreciate you highlighting that, Ricky. I think one other thing that I wanted to highlight relative actually to which I try to I'm going to be very the program and boundary is not really my wheelhouse, and I'm very happy about that. If I'm going to be honest, I think the one thing that I would say is that because of the discussion around Crown, we're in this period of influx and not really knowing which direction we're going to go. As you guys mentioned, this whole process was a result of Crown and Woodward, and if Crown is kind of taken out, it changes the scenario significantly. I will say the other thing just to and I don't know if there's any parents that live within the Silver Spring International community. The closing of a school is a very significant thing for not just the school but for a community, right? People move to communities to be near schools. So I just want to acknowledge the severity. And we have not closed a school in Montgomery County Public Schools in a significant period of time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Peter. I'd like to actually ask then another follow-up on the sort of safety and security piece, which is what I brought up about the off-campus behavior. That's something that I hear a lot about, and I think there's a twofold piece to this. That sometimes we have these fights occurring, and they're actually around bullying situations that have gone on in the schools. And sometimes too, we've become aware after the fact that kids are even, carrying weapons to defend themselves because they're being picked on or bullied or whatever. And it's kind of like that's the option that they've chosen. But, what's the thinking around when these disputes, kids are smart. They know if they step off the grounds that, they can take care of business, as it were, without the same ramifications. Is there any evolving thinking about responsibilities in terms of student behavior off campus?
So I would share three things. The first is last week we met with all of our high school principals in the Montgomery County Police Department. Transparently, a long overdue conversation in regards to how we collaborate with one another. They tend to be between CEO and principal and not bringing everyone together to talk about how we coordinate and how we communicate with them. And just simply roles and responsibilities, right? As the SRO program shifted over to the CEO program, there I think has been some needed clarity on both sides of that, specifically around off-campus things. And our safety and security folks, and Lyric, you dealt with this on the front lines when things have extended into the community, whether it's at a metro station, and what's the responsibility of MCPS in terms of extending their footprint beyond school grounds, right? And how do they work and coordinate with the police? So I'm happy to share that I think our coordination has gotten stronger. We're going to be meeting 4 times this year. We're walking through kind of just making sure everyone has the same interpretation of the memorandum of understanding that was created back in 2022. The other component is, and this is one that we're seeing play out nationwide, is the strong belief that if a student has a weapon, that they don't return to school. And what I mean by that is we've expanded our alternative programs in terms of putting staffing, social emotional support in those places to ensure that students receive what they need. The idea of it being appropriate if a student brings a weapon to Kennedy and the answer is to administratively place them at BCC, that's not the answer. There's clearly some supports that are needed to be put in place for that student before they successfully transition back into a comprehensive high school. The third piece is the code of conduct piece. And it remains very much the same, honestly, Lyric. It is these things tendency to fall around the disruption that is caused by an incident that occurs off campus. If an arrest is made, we go through the reportable offense process and make a determination around not only disciplinary consequences, but a placement conversation, whether it's alternatives or if it's we've seen, situations where students don't return to school because they are processed through the juvenile system.
Yeah. And just to clarify for people, so MCPS used to have a school resource officer who was a police officer supposed to be trained to work with high schools. Some of them were excellent. Some of them, some of them needed a little bit more assistance, but they used to be in all the high schools in the county. The county executive and some of the county council did not agree with that, and so the program was removed. It was changed to something called the community engagement officer. That individual is not in the school in like a daily, does not have office space, or is really not in the school. They're in the school school periodically, but not consistently. And they're often in their car. They're usually stationed somewhere else. And generally, they respond to all the schools in the cluster. So it's a different setup. However, like for things like football games, dances, etc., MCPS does contract with the police force. So you will have off-duty and other officers who are brought in as security. So, I mean, I think people should understand that, if you have a homecoming dance, there are armed police officers who are there at the dance. If you have a football game, there are armed police officers that are there. Like this is part of the security situation and the security footprint, as well as the in-house security team for each school. Those are not armed individuals. They are trained security professionals. One of the conversations has also been, how can we increase those numbers? BCC had, for 2,400 students, 5 officers. So the math on that is not great. It's like 450 kids per officer. And sometimes that's just not enough. So those are the components of how school security works. I hope I got that right, Peter, but I think I've
You did. Lyric, I would just say, and I'd be interested to hear Ricky's thoughts on this as well, is one of the things that has been a challenge for us as a school system around safety and security at events, like a football game, is there's no relationship with the people who sign up to do overtime at a football game, right? So the coordination that, principals meeting this person for the first time, their engagement with community may not be a skill set that they have at all, right? So you're getting people that may not have experience around students, may not have experience around the parents or families of students. And so, when we're calling something community engagement, we're not necessarily always seeing the engagement part when we get police that don't have that background or experience show up for special events.
Okay, we are at 8:10. If you don't mind, I think we would take some questions from the audience. Jerry, go ahead.
On the boundary study, will we see MCPS give priority to students that can walk to the high schools to reduce the parking requirements and the number of parents driving to and from school, picking up their kids? Because most high school kids are very afraid of yellow school buses because it really ruins their reputation. And the other part of the question is, do we have an adequate number of buses to transport students to the different high schools with all this boundary changes? We only have a limited number of school buses and they're not readily available.
Jerry, I want to say something just as a parent before Dr. Moran does this. I will, and I think that I would get probably a thumbs up from Dr. Moran and Ricky. School in high school is butts in seats at 7:45 in the morning. I'm going to tell you that the best thing about having my kids no longer in the MCPS system is I am not nearly as exhausted. Those of you who know me can probably see how much less exhausted I am from like not having to get up at 6 a.m. to get people out the door who were struggling. So as a parent who has, we have sprinted to school, I have driven to school. We did have a bus, but those buses are really early and every minute of sleep is precious for these students. So I just want to sort of say, I know that it's a hassle for people in the neighborhoods, but I'm telling you, there is nothing, and in some ways, there's actually nothing worse than a kid who can't stay awake during first period. There's nothing worse than a student athlete who's driving tired after a match or a game. It's just every parent's nightmare because there isn't bus transportation for student athletes. So it's not that they don't like the reputation of the yellow school buses. It's a sleep deprivation issue, and that's really fundamental to this. I do think they've tried very hard to prioritize the walk sheds in these new boundaries. Like I don't think for the most part, they've taken kids away from the walk sheds, or they've sort of rejiggered it to do that. But I'll let the current people speak to that.
Yeah, so Jerry, I would say just two things. So first, again, I'll go with being a parent, and since Lyric used the example of Albert Einstein High School and BCC, I don't think my kids would ever make it to BCC, and I mean that in terms of just like it is it is complete chaos in my home in the mornings. I can't imagine them getting from, Silver Spring to downtown Chase. So I'm just saying that as a parent, right? So, in terms of the transportation study that's been done along the program study, we would have enough buses to transport students. I think one of the questions, Jerry, that you raised that is a safety component is you'd have students driving longer distances. And again, using BCC as an example, driving through essentially a city to get to school and park, right? So, if they're not taking the bus, they're driving or a family member is going to be dropping them off. If they're driving themselves, that leads to, I think, a larger conversation that we would need to have even around the age of that student, if it's allowed, parent permission, the parking component to that, because you'd have to take that into the number of home students that would park on campus as well. So that's a great question, Jerry.
Thank you.
Jane Cunningham.
Hi, I want to follow up on the safety and security. My community lives right next door to Woodward High School, and this year they had a lockdown. And we were the last to know about the lockdown. It is my understanding that you have software when the students are enrolled in the school. They're given access, the parents are given access, as well as the PTAs, to Parents Square. And I had many, many, many people here in my community very concerned that we were unaware of a lockdown until it was reported by the media. And I have to be very concerned about my neighborhood and the safety of my neighborhood. And to comment on what Lyric is saying, I even live closer to the school than you at BCC. And there has been little, the community engagement to recognize safety factors has not been there. I've sent several requests in which I've gotten a standard answer that Parent Square is only used for parents, and yet it's given to the PTA. So I would like to remind you, Dr. Moran, that we have no students in my community that go to this school.
Mm-hmm.
And the dismissal by MCPS with regard to a request to be given, the HOA board president being given permission to be put on that, doesn't seem to be something that's, to use your words, logical or common sense.
Mm-hmm.
I have a responsibility to not put our residents at risk. And this goes back to the school being within feet of people's homes and no attempt for MCPS to reach out to that community and work with that community to address the many issues that were discussed with regard to BCC and that were brought up tonight. So I would like to ask you to take action on Parent Square for the surrounding communities that surround Woodward. Devonshire East is my community. And that I've read about the software that you bought allows this. You just have to, and I'm not asking for my whole community, I'm asking for the HOA board president and the condo board president to get that software so we can notify the community that there's a lockdown in the school. You have MCPS alert. It does not do immediate alerts to the community.
Okay, I think we understand the question. Go ahead, Dr. Moran.
Yeah. So, Jane, first off, I just put my email in there if you want to just send me a direct email about that. I don't know the correspondence that you've had with, Northwood while they've been occupying Woodward. I think the other part is, and this is a conversation that, the community has had as well, is our system for communication is pretty antiquated. If you look at colleges right now, right, whether if you attend the college or you live in close proximity to the college and there's a lockdown at the college, an alert goes out to everyone within that community, right? We are working to transition to that type of emergency response communication system. It's not earth-shattering by any by any stretch of the imagination. I will tell you, interestingly enough, I was driving to Tennessee with my kids recently, drove past James Madison on 81, and I guess because I was in close proximity to James Madison, received an emergency alert around something that had just simply happened on their campus. So, Jane, I hear you around giving access to the HOA, and there's ways that you can also put a filter on so that they would only receive emergency information. So please reach out to me, and I can work with you on that. But I don't want to say we're going to, I don't know the time frame on us moving to a community alert system, but I know that it's something that is being, very closely looked at.
I'm not asking for a community alert system. I have no parents have children going to this school right now. It could even be short term until the Woodward students.
Understand.
So, Peter, I could throw out a suggestion here. I actually think that this is something, if you're going to have a lockdown, there's going to be an MCPD response. And I think that this is something that maybe each MCPD district could just keep this and have some sort of designated communication that goes out. Because I assume that they have a way of reaching, the HOAs and everything like that, that they're already plugged in to do that they would send alerts. And maybe this it's not a long-term fix, but as a temporary patch, something like that, to do it through the police partners as well.
I appreciate that, but I have written correspondence, which I'll send Dr. Moran, that says that MCPS did not direct them to do that, so therefore they're not going to do it.
Well, but that's something that they can have a conversation about now that you're having these quarterly meetings, et cetera. Like maybe that is something that would be appropriate. Since they do put it out on Twitter and everything like that, the police department does. So
Appreciate that feedback.
Okay, Deborah.
Jane, I'll quickly, I know you had a direct request. I have been advocating in my advocacy that I believe that MCPS should, in fact, be much more transparent about its communications. Right now, the system is very much only parents and staff who go to the specific school get community letters. I think community letters should be posted on the school website. I think more information in our public schools should be public because it is a public good. It is for everybody. And whether you have a child in that particular school or not, you might be visiting, you might be attending a school play, you might, be volunteering, whatever. It is a public good. And so I think community letters should not be as gatekept as they currently are. So I know it's a slightly different point than you were making, but in that spirit, I actually think more information to communities is better.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Deborah Berger, go ahead. Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just confused right now with the number of spots in each of these regional programs. Like, will there be APs in each of the schools? How will they decide which programs are in each school? Right now, my daughter is in the Apex. It's the fourth, and at WJ, it's an advanced program, and this is my fourth out of four kids. Thankfully, last one in this situation, who have gone through Apex. Yes, but it's a great program. Will there be other programs such as the Apex? Will it be by school? Will there be equity? I know that in our cluster around here, we've been saying for WJ and Woodward to make sure that there's equity and parity in the schools. How will they make sure that there's equity and parity and advanced programs in each of these schools as well?
So, Deborah, I'll take a shot at this, and again, I may have to, circle back to you on some of this, and my email's in there just to make sure that I get you the most accurate information. But so right now that it's set up as essentially like regions, right? And schools would have specific programs where students could apply to access that program within the region, right? So there'd be a certain number of seats. Let's say if, again, just using BCC and Einstein, it's been a good example for this for tonight. So BCC right now on paper has an IB program. My children who are Einstein is our homeschool could apply to go to the IB program at BCC, which may have 168 seats for students outside of BCC high school. If they got in, then they would be receive transportation to BCC or miss the bus and never get to BCC, as I shared earlier. The AP classes, which you referred to, would be still specific to their home school. So those would still be accessible for any student that that is their home high school. I don't know, Lyric, if you or Ricky want to build off that at all.
I can explain a little bit more about that too. So they're basically sort of, I guess what I would call them, and I think they have a different name, but it's easier to understand them as like marquee programs. So for BCC, it would be the IB program. Walt Whitman would have a like social justice and advocacy program as its marquee program. I think Einstein might have like health science or something like that as its marquee program, and also the music program that I cited as a second marquee. Then each of those schools have sort of their homegrown programs. So for in the case of BCC, it has something called Project Lead the Way, which is an advanced engineering. Walt Whitman also offers Project Lead the Way. Einstein offers something else that's in that category. So it's like they're Bethesda now has, or Bethesda Today or whatever it's called, but they've published this. If you Google it, you can find it. They will show you the charts. It gets a little confusing, but if you just go for your region, you can understand it. Where you are, for example, Woodward is designated as a performing arts school, which is actually kind of interesting because the very original idea when Woodward was going to, when they first talked about reopening Woodward, and I mean, this is like more than a decade old, I think, and makes me feel really old to talk about it. But the original MCPS plan was to make that a performing arts school. It becomes even more humorous when you realize that originally they didn't put an auditorium in Woodward, and parents had to fight to say, please put an auditorium in when they were constructing it. But anyway, it is a performing arts school. And actually, at the time, a bunch of us who are on this committee were like, ooh, I don't know about that because, like, we know a lot of people, A, they've got Duke Ellington in the district, and B, we know a lot of people in performing arts, and like mostly they're working as servers, and it's not really the pathway to a lucrative job. So, would you consider like health sciences or something a little bit more STEMmy that might be better for employment, or hospitality since we have Marriott? I don't know, but it started as performing arts. I guess it's finishing as that's its marquee program. WJ will keep other programs. So there are going to be, and then we'll have what the new ones are. So you sort of have to look at both of those. And I do think the schools that offer AP will continue to offer AP as one of their just regular core curriculum things. That the special programs are like IB, the social justice thing, the health sciences, some of those. If that sort of makes sense. It's complicated, and that is definitely what's causing a lot of anxiety and throwing people. And I think that again, I'd sort of make a pitch to pilot it rather than go everywhere. But
Deborah, specifically with Apex, because I'm a little bit familiar with the program, that is what MCPS calls a local program. And so the answer we're getting from MCPS right now is schools may keep their local programs subject to some evaluation whose criteria we're not yet sure about. And that's why a lot of parents are concerned because, like Apex, many schools have homegrown programs that they've come to love and enjoy. And it's not clear which of those programs will survive. We're told that they may survive, but there's just no clear criteria for which those programs will be kept. And I think the other thing to your earlier point about AP classes, remember that it's always AP classes can be listed, but then they might not be able to be filled because you might not have enough students to fill the class, or you might not have enough qualified teachers to teach it. So don't forget those two variables and figuring out if what APs will or will not be available in your
right.
school.
And when they talk, when Dr. Moran gives you a number like 168 seats, which I think is actually probably a pretty reasonable number, especially like if you consider the size of BCC, which is almost at max capacity, which is about 2,400. that's spread over 4 years. So if you divide by 4, you're looking more at like 40, 42 seats outside of the school. So again, it's not a ton of students who are going to be admitted to that. And I think they're just logistical issues around that, but that's definitely a concern of what those numbers would be and what if the demand is very disaggregate to what the actual availability is and how do you fix that, or can
No,
you?
I appreciate it. And actually, I was on the board. So my oldest is 30. So been doing this many years and was PTA president for a while during this period of time as well. So I've been very involved in I think this is the 23rd year straight on a PTA board at one level or another, from the 30-year-old 4 kids later. So I know and I appreciate, but I think I am concerned for the future about making sure that there, and as you're saying, where there's AP classes listed and not always filled or not enough teachers, that's going to be a big concern, is making sure, I guess, from that level, that the teachers, especially some of these new schools, will be trained enough to be teaching these AP classes, because that has been, at least with my older boys, has been the lifeline personally. The AP classes has been great. I had one of them that was able to graduate in 2.5 years from University of Maryland honors, and 4 years get his master's from public school. And, they've done a great job. And I just want to continue for the future to making sure that we still have this great education down the road as well. So thank you very much.
Joel Titlebaum.
Yeah, hi, folks. I'm Joel Titlebaum, and I live in the Rosemary Hills neighborhood, and I'm a new delegate with MCCF, along with Carlotta Amaduzzi, who is also in this session. And we are both impressed by what MCCF does, and I'm extraordinarily impressed by this session. I've never seen anything like it. I'm in my late 80s, so what do I know? But here's the concern I would have as an old person looking at what you young people are thinking about. When I went to MCPS schools, and my brothers and sisters, there was something called the school board. I have not heard the school board mentioned. Elected officials, nonpartisan, supposed to be representative there, specific locations and regions, and they're supposed to make policy, and they're supposed to guide the superintendent and the school system, and by the way, help with making budgets and check to see if things are done right, or if there's scandal, or in many cases corruption, as we've seen. And how come no one in this group has mentioned issues about the school board and its elected officials? From my perspective, as a resident, long term, we've always turned to our school board elected officials who we elected, and we want them to do things that are good for the school system and for the schools that we attend. I happen to live in what is currently called the BCC cluster. My kids went to the BCC cluster. They did fine. My son has his children in the Silver Spring, whatever they call that, the multiple choice system, which apparently is going away. My granddaughter attends Woodland, a wonderful new school in my neighborhood. My grandson went to Woodland. He's now in Sligo. All of a sudden, I'm hearing Sligo might go away. I better not tell my kids; they'll freak out. It's a very good school with a lousy infrastructure, as you all have described. So can you bring it to bear the larger scale community linkages between the elected officials, the appointed officials, of whom Dr. Moran is a stellar example? I'm very impressed with him just listening to him and the way he thinks and goes about things. And from what I can tell, there is an accretion, a long-term accretion of buried mistakes in the MCPS. It was illustrated by the dreadful situation of the infrastructure of many schools, neglected over time. I'm almost inclined to say criminally neglected, because people literally avoided doing things about it. And I put that on the school board to some extent. So can you bring us into a bigger picture of what's going on, Mr. Moran, Dr. Moran, and our two moderators here? What's going on with the school board? How do they fit into the picture? Are they useful at all? Or are they just, what do you call it, bringing cases up to the Supreme Court of the United States that are bound to fail? What's going on here?
Ooh, well, the school board employs Dr. Moran technically, so I don't want to put him too much in the hot seat. And I love the word accretion as a writer. Thank you. Oh my goodness. I always love it when people bring out like a big, good vocabulary word.
Well, sorry about that.
No, I love it. It made me very excited. Ricky, do you want to weigh in first?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure we don't lack for opinions here.
yeah, no,
Okay.
Joel, thank you for this
Be
because
concise though, guys, because it's getting late and I have two
Okay.
questions.
Make it quick, folks.
all right, I'll be quick. Joel, you bring up a great point. There's what I call the trifecta of what runs our school systems. There is the Board of Education, as you mentioned, the county council that funds the Board of Education, and then there's MCPS, the system itself that, of course, runs. And so
Which is supposed to be autonomous, right?
they're all supposed to be autonomous. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
My opinion is that the Board of Education has failed. Several boards of education, to be clear, not just the current one, have failed in their oversight duties and responsibilities of Montgomery County Public Schools. And that's not just my opinion. MCPS has had to settle many lawsuits that state as much. It led to the ouster of one of our superintendents. Oversight has not been a thing that the Board of Education has done well, in my opinion. And I'm not sure what would fix it, because we actually, all three Board of Education members currently sitting they unseated incumbents. And so I thought we would get fresh blood, fresh thinking, more oversight. That has not been my experience. One of the things that went that went not that did not have good oversight was background checks. So the background checks and the compliance with state requirements for background checks was not followed. It was unearthed by the Office of the Inspector General. MCPS was notified. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of finger pointing about who was to blame.
Don't take too much time. I get your point.
But I'm done.
So
I'm done.
Okay.
I would just
Is it worth having a Board of Education?
I would just piggyback.
Should we community members be responsive to them?
Okay. Well, I would just piggyback on that by saying I really think there are several problems with this. One, the Board of Education has become kind of a full-time job that pays $25,000 a year. It's just an impossible situation to get the type of oversight that's needed. I also think it really needs a change of mandate. It should function much more like the Board of Trustees for either a business or a college or university. If you think of the level of scrutiny that they provide, I think it's not it doesn't see it sees itself more as a collaborative partner than as a strong overseer. And I would also bring into here as well the county council. I think that the county council, everybody treats it like a hot potato. They're like, oh, well, that's not really my job. The county council is like, we just write the check. We can't ask any questions. I think the county council should be calling people in and asking people questions. It's, there's nothing that says they cannot do that. So I think that it's a little bit of the circular firing squad. Everybody's pointing figures and nobody's willing to take responsibility. And it's actually, that's one of the other things that citizens really have to do is to say, look, we're not writing you any more checks of our own money until you start actually doing the oversight jobs that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be asking MCPS tough questions. You're supposed to be scrutinizing their budgets. I will say this, that state law is also a problem. The state law actually requires less budget transparency from MCPS than is required for a functioning PTA to pass its own audit. And we have to be audited every year,
Right.
And our compliance is tighter. So there are a lot of things that can be fixed, and there's a lot to go around.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's a new world. Thank you.
Dr. Moran, do you want to comment on that? Not really. No.
Well, no, I would just say that so the superintendent will put forward the proposal relative to the boundary and program study here in January, and the board will be the ones that vote on it to move forward or not. So
Right.
Okay, so I have two quick questions. So I was discouraged recently to see that the criminal background checks aren't being done on time within the school system. Can you explain that? It's not a hard thing to do, why there isn't a system for keeping up with it?
So it's a great question, and one that I'm disappointed that I have to even answer because
We
it's
are
a,
losing you.
are you losing me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I said I'm disappointed to even have to, respond and answer this question because essentially, a criminal background system is one of the most fundamental things that an organization does, specifically a school system that is charged with keeping children safe. Essentially, my understanding of how we got here is that following the pandemic, we began to enroll schools in the RAP Back program, which is through the FBI. So RAP Back means that you don't have to continue to be fingerprinted once you're in the system. They flag things and they report it then to our Human Resources Department. We had, I would say, about 25 to 30 of our schools go through that process. Prior to the pandemic, went into the pandemic, came back out of the pandemic, and did not continue the process until it was flagged by, like Mr. Ribeiro said, the Office of the General Inspector. Sorry, and that was flagged and shared with us back in June. And happy to share though, but I believe by December the 12th all of our employees that were outstanding will have gone through the RAP Back program, bringing us up to date. All those that are school based. Very disappointing, embarrassing, frankly. But that's where we are right now.
Liz Joyce, last question. You're muted.
You see, I'm so compliant. Thank you all. It's been a wonderful presentation. I agree. It's been really edifying. As someone mentioned at the beginning of the program, half of the county budget is the school system. And I don't have children. I don't have children in the school system, so I'm not closely involved with it. But I've been here many years. It astonishes me that there has been such a lack of accountability. And in many ways it's futile to point fingers, and it's a huge system, which in itself is a problem. But I'm hoping that going forward, some mechanism will be set up to require the appropriate oversight from the council and from the state that is appropriate, and a way to prevent this kind of catastrophe financially that obviously has happened, because it is literally eating the ground out from under what used to be a really fine system and still could be and must be. But it's really a horror to watch.
Well, Liz, I would just say that there are, in terms of the maintenance issues, this is a problem that exists across Maryland. I mean, MCPS is the largest, so the issues are going to be broader and deeper. But we're not actually the worst. I think there are like one or two counties that are ahead in terms of the condition of their buildings being terrible. And I agree with you. I actually think that this is something where the state has not done a good job, because there are some parts that fall under state education mandates, and they could require much more transparency in terms of the budget, and they could also require much more in terms of maintenance. And this is a conversation that is going to have to be had with the upcoming county council elections. There are a lot of open seats, and District 1, that it's all, these are all open seats. The incumbents are not running, and this has to be part of the conversation and the debate, full stop. And it's got to be part of the conversation and debate. I know most of our representatives run unopposed, but it has to be part of the conversation and the debate in the upcoming election. How are you going to address this? What are you going to change? How are you going to start fixing it?
Okay, well, we have gone over time. It was an outstanding program, and I want to thank all three of you very much for coming here tonight and devoting so much time to this and preparing slides. I think it was a terrific program. To everyone who's still on, it will be posted on our website if you want to distribute a link in your own community, on your listservs or whatever. We always post the video of our meetings every month. And that's that. Thank you very much. If the Civic Fed people want to hang in, or anyone actually, we're going to make a few announcements after this. But thank
Peter,
you
Ricky,
so much
great
for
to
coming.
see you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Thanks.
Take
Yeah,
care.
Lyric, Ricky, and Dr. Moran, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you. I have a couple of announcements. A reminder that on November 15th, we're going to have a county executive candidate forum, Democratic candidate forum. It'll be at the Newport Mill Middle School on Sunday the 15th. That's this Sunday from 3 to 5 p.m. The doors will open at 2:30 if you want a good seat. The forum will be moderated by Lou Peck, contributing editor of Bethesda Magazine. I think it's going to be a great event. So for the Civic Fed members who are still online, we need everyone to come and bring a couple of people from your community, friends, spouses, whatever you can do. The worst thing for the Civic Fed is to look like we don't have an audience for what's going on in county government. And so to have an event like this and not be able to fill the room is pretty much of a disaster. So I am counting on our members to both come and advertise it in your own community and make sure that you come and bring a few people, kind of like the firefighters do their voting thing, Drive with Five, something similar to that. We have been told by the Parks Foundation, the Glenmart Local Park on Randolph Road on Saturday, December 6th from 1 to 3, we'll have the unveiling of a mural with a lot of fun activities, refreshments, arts and crafts for kids. They'll be collecting non-perishable food for a food bank. The other announcement is that we're going to have a Thanksgiving parade float. Jerry Garson is going to drive his car. If anyone has always wanted to be in a parade, please contact Jerry and you can ride in the car with Jerry. And does anyone else have any announcements?
Yeah, I want to remind our members that tomorrow is Veterans Day and that there's going to be veterans observances throughout the county. The one I go to is the Wheaton Veterans Park off of Reedy Drive in Wheaton. And while the weather may be a little chilly and windy, we hope people can go out and support our veterans.
Liz, Joyce, go ahead. Liz, your hand's up. You're muted.
Is the forum on Sunday the 16th or Saturday the 15th? You said Sunday.
It's
I think Cheryl said Sunday the 15th, but it's Saturday the 15th.
yeah, sorry about that. It's the 15th.
Saturday.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. It's the 15th. Linda, did you put your hand up?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I
ahead.
just want to let people know that we are organizing the beginnings of an East County group, and we'll recommend that they all join MCCF. It's just the initial group of officers who came to our Citizens Association meeting in September. And then Cheryl kindly added a number of other contacts that I did not have yet. And so we'll see if we can get those folks to join up.
That's a great idea. I know the Kensington, some of the Kensington civics also sort of cooperate and share information and act as a unit. Douglas Taylor, you want to go ahead?
Yes, I'm sorry to everyone, but I missed the location for the candidates forum. Where is
Oh,
it?
no problem. It's the Newport Mill Middle School.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. And is that Patricia Tyson there? Hi there. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I went to the Veterans Tribute in Silver Spring, done by Silver Spring Town Center on, I think it was Friday night, and Alan was the keynote speaker. And Alan comes from a military background, really, a lot of folks in his family that are in the military. And Alan, your speech was excellent. And especially when you added in character, about the character that can be built, through what we see as the military and all. So thank you for that excellent speech. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Speaking of excellent events, I attended the Talbot Avenue Bridge Lantern Walk this weekend, and Patricia Tyson is a key player in organizing that. It was an absolutely lovely event with songs and lanterns and a lot of inspirational speeches from the organizers. So thank you for flagging that to our attention. I know Brooke Thomas, who was here online tonight, also attended, and she said she thought it was a terrific event.
It was so great. So thank you all for coming without you being there, and just the way it was. The atmosphere was absolutely wonderful. It was a healing atmosphere.
It was really beautiful.
Thank you. I'll tell our committee.
Yes, please do. And then I think we're going to get an update on the University Boulevard plan from John Holden. Thanks for being patient, John.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me, Cheryl?
Yes, we can.
Great. I do want to take a couple of minutes about what happened today. The council's Planning, Housing, and Parks, or PHP committee, held its fourth and final work session on this University Boulevard Corridor Plan, or UBC plan. And this plan is relevant to everybody in the Civic Fed because it's the first corridor plan to be put forward by the planning board since the Thrive Montgomery 2050. So what happens on this corridor will sort of set a precedent for what happens on the other corridors throughout the county. So today, the council staff went through, this is a work session, they went through its staff report on a variety of topics. And I want to touch on just a few of them that are more broadly relevant. And that includes zoning, environmental sustainability, and racial equity and social justice. First with zoning, and I'll provide a little bit of background. When the council approved this ZTA 25-02 this past July as part of the More Housing Now, they already upzoned single-family properties that are directly on University Boulevard and on the other major corridors. The justification was to provide some workforce housing when properties redeveloped to triplexes and larger multifamily buildings. Well, here we are just a couple months later, and this UBC plan changes that zoning by overriding ZTA 25-02 using a commercial residential neighborhood or CRN zone. This CRN zone would eliminate the workforce housing requirements in the past ZTA and also reduce setbacks and reduce parking requirements, a number of other things. Councilmember Kristen Mink, who's not a member of the committee but attended all four of these work sessions, she had proposed an amendment that would remove the upzoning to CRN of the single-family housing, leaving the ZTA 2502 in place. And Will Jawando, council member and committee member, Will Jawando supported that amendment. But Natalie Fanning Gonzalez supported the planning board's recommendation to upzone entire neighborhood blocks near University Boulevard, not to the CRN, not just properties on the boulevard. And the chair, Andrew Friedson, proposed changing the zoning to CRN for only those single-family homes that are that abut University Boulevard. And he and Fanny Gonzalez characterized this as a middle ground proposal, but it really was not middle ground because it overrides the zoning changes in the ZTA 25-02. In the end, council members Friedson and Fanny Gonzalez voted to recommend Friedson's proposal by 2-1, with Jawando opposing, and they basically voted to deny the proposed amendment from Councilmember Mink and to override the ZTA 25-02 that they just passed. Let me jump ahead a little to the bottom line. Ultimately, council members Friedson and Fanny Gonzalez voted to send the UBC plan to the full council, which will have a work session on it already next Tuesday, November 18. Council Vice VP Jawando voted against advancing the plan. I want to touch briefly on the other two aspects. First, environmental sustainability. In the council staff report and in today's statements to the committee, the council staff simply repeated Montgomery Planning's what I call aspirational statements that they are, quote, expanding the tree canopy and, quote, designing University Boulevard as a cool corridor with green infrastructure, close quote. They completely ignored an August 4 memo from the Department of Environmental Protection, which states that these goals are impossible to achieve given the other parts of the plan, such as the increased housing density. Unfortunately, the PHP committee didn't challenge the aspirational statements, but I did hear today from Councilmember Mink's chief of staff that she plans to bring up the environmental issues at the full council next week. And probably she and the rest of the council need to hear from more of us about this. With respect to the racial equity, first, know that there is already a ZTA 25-12 to implement the UBC plan via a University Boulevard overlay zone. And with this, the ZTA, racial equity and social justice impact statement was prepared by the Office of Legislative Oversight. And that analysis found that the UBC plan, quote, could have a negative impact on racial equity and social justice in the county. The conclusion was clear. They stated that, quote, the proposed rezoning that is inherent to ZTA 25-12 could disproportionately displace existing Black and Latinx homeowners for the development of market rate housing units, close quote. So another thing to know is that the county council already held a public hearing back on October 28th about this ZTA 25-12. And multiple people, including Cheryl, identified the racial equity issues in their 3-minute testimony. And every person who gave testimony that day, except the one planning representative, spoke against this ZTA 25-12. But also, the council staff's senior legislative analyst, Pamela Dunn, attended the public hearing. Nevertheless, the council staff report that she prepared for today's session completely ignored the RESJ impact statement and the October 28 testimony. Fortunately, Will Jawando asked a number of good questions today. In response, planning staff suggested that the racial equity issues could be addressed by a review of data by planning every 5 years. And Jawando questioned whether something could be done now. There is still something that can be done because it still needs review by the full council, but those are some of the key things that I think are relevant to everyone in MCCF with respect to zoning, environmental sustainability, and racial equity. There were other things that they talked about that are more specific to traffic things on University Boulevard and in Four Corners, but I won't go into that detail, especially given the hour. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate your update. A couple of things on that. When John said it's really relevant to everyone, this is just the first of what will be, I think, at least 9 corridor plans. So it really is important, first of all, that we all hang together. I would, really like to see more involvement from other areas on University Boulevard plan so we could try to shape the way they go about this. The other thing on the ResJ analysis, they actually never talk about the ResJ analysis. It usually doesn't go in their favor, so they ignore it. We have a mandatory process where that is prepared, and unless witnesses bring it up, it never comes up. And I'm thinking that maybe the Civic Fed should write a letter before the council work session asking them, you're going to have council staff or planning staff or whatever present. You also should have a presentation in public from the racial equity officer of the racial equity review, because they kind of keep that, undercover and in the background, and it's as relevant as any other staff presentation on these issues.
Chiwando did have someone from OLO come to the table and speak a little bit to it.
Good.
Yeah, that was very good.
Yeah.
John, this is Karen Bolte from the Wildwood Manor Citizens Association. I just had a question because I had this session on my calendar, and then when I went to look for it online, it wasn't there anywhere. So I thought it wasn't occurring until next week. So was it available to stream online? Because I was not able to find it today, and I had been watching the other work session, the other previous 3 work sessions.
Yes, it was available online. That's to watch. That's actually, unfortunately, that's how I observed. But it was moved up. The usual meeting time for the PHP committee is in the afternoon. It was moved up to the morning, but yeah, and I think, well, that's all that I can say. I was able to watch it on there.
Well, that explains it, because if it was in the morning when I logged in at 1:30, that's why I couldn't find it, because it had already happened.
Correct.
Okay.
So a recording should be available. And that's what, there were a couple of other people that I know who joined late because they didn't realize. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I hate to be, skeptical, but, my guess is that, this was always the plan to come, the quote compromise was going to be the CRN on the corridor. And, Fanny Gonzalez would say, oh, well, it should be the interior neighborhoods. And then Friedson can come, swooping in and say, oh, well, we should restrict it to just those abutting the corridor. And then, of course, it's 2-1 always against Jawando. So all the objections that Jawando makes, and yes, Council Member Mink has been, very strong advocate for her community's interests in these work sessions as well. She's not even on the committee, so she has no vote as well. So, it easily passed out of committee, and now is probably just going to get, the rubber stamp from the full council. So,
yeah. Harriet Quinn, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to add one thing, and thank you, John. That was an excellent report. That because the CRN is being done through an overlay zone, which is accomplished by a ZTA, not necessarily the master plan, to me, it seems that they can always add more properties later through another ZTA, rather than opening up the master plan again. And for those who've worked on master plans, you probably are aware that it takes a long time to open up a master plan again. So I'm very skeptical about this whole overlay zone business, because it's really a ZTA, not a master plan, not part of the master plan. I mean, it's part of the master plan, but it's executed through a ZTA, which can always be amended. So it's a compromise now, but I wouldn't be surprised if later they add more properties.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harriet. Howard, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow on what she just said, is that both Andrew Friedson and Jason Sartori have in recent months been talking about how corridor planning is the way to go, and corridor planning is what they're going to do, and to the exclusion of master plans, sector plans. And I think that you have hit the nail on the head, Cheryl, in that this is going to be the way they get the change made without having to go through all of the due process of master plans. It's overlays on top of overlays, and if not by design, then certainly the actual effect is that the ability of an individual person living in the area or living anywhere else to understand what is happening to their community is reduced to zero.
Howard, I actually think it's even worse than that. I think it might have been in the very first staff report of this University Boulevard corridor plan where I'm pretty sure they determined that these corridor plans are master plans, which I was shocked by. I'll have to go back to my notes, but I am pretty sure that that's what they said. Well, we can do this because corridor planning is master planning.
That is correct. They were, Pamela Dunn and company were attempting to refute the comments by the county executive about corridor planning versus true master plan, community master planning with community engagement.
Yeah. Jerry Garson, your hand is up.
Yes. MCCF worked with Senator Ben Kramer in the state legislature to have the Montgomery County Inspector General having oversight over the MCPS. To have the county council have oversight over MCCPS requires that the state legislature act. Does the Montgomery County Civic Federation want the state legislature to act to give the county council oversight over MCPS?
Can I ask a question about that? This is Harriet.
Yes.
Are you saying have the council have oversight instead of the inspector general? I don't think we want that.
Have both have oversight.
Is the inspector general still independent?
Yeah, but he has very limited staff. The council has huge staff. And since we're spending half the budget on the school board, no one has, the inspector general probably would not have oversight over building construction and that, and building maintenance.
Well, I think we're going to have to, maybe we can take that up at our next meeting. I'd have to hear more about it. We have to write a brief of some kind, like a little memo for our members to explain it. But I think it was a good issue to raise and figure out if we want to get behind it. I think it's a good idea, Jerry. So why don't we do that? But back to this discussion, I've sort of lost the thread of it, and it seemed like there was something. Karen, what was the last thing you said?
I think she was talking about master plans versus corridor plans.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they just made this determination that these corridor plans, I mean, for University Boulevard, but these corridor plans are actually master plans. So our argument, Civic Federation, our citizens associations, all of our citizens associations, which has said that they should go through the master plans and not bypass the master planning process and the sector planning process. They're saying, oh no, this is the master planning process.
Right.
Their staff report says, quote, basically all master plans are amendments to the general plan, and a corridor master plan is simply a type of area master plan, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, then that's the end of master plans. That's the bottom line there. They've been wanting that for a while.
And yes, and it's more like they dictate the plan. It's not really any community consultation process, which I think is part of what the civics have been arguing for, to make it, more of a community process than this has been.
So I'm getting a little confused about all the different pieces of this, but is the guts of it that we're worried about in ZTAs that can't be vetoed by the county executive?
Well, so I'm just raising the point that this whole CRN business is being done through a ZTA.
Right.
Not the master plan itself. And so at a later time, they can propose another ZTA to amend the ZTA to
Right.
add more properties. Whereas with the master plan process, the zoning is executed through the sectional map amendment. It stays until the master plan is reopened again, or sometimes they'll do a minor master plan amendment, which is more of a community conversation than a ZTA that,
Right.
usually they don't do ZTAs to change this much zoning, this many properties. It's done
Right.
through in the master plan itself.
Right.
So you can see how ZTAs sort of circumvent the master plan process.
Right. I guess I was just adding to that they can't be vetoed by the county executive, right?
Right.
Not right. Nor can a master plan be vetoed by a county executive. But the point is there's more consultation in a true master plan process than a ZTA.
Well, I think the other thing, the ZTA process is, I think they've realized after the attainable housing disaster that they do better picking off one small area at a time. And so I think that is for sure why you're right, Harriet. We're going to see ZTAs getting amended for neighborhoods in smaller chunks because then that small area, whatever it is on their own to defend themselves.
Yes, exactly. And, people may not even be aware when a ZTA comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And with a master plan process, there are a series of meetings, at least, even if they don't listen.
Right.
There's no meeting for a ZTA. It's just a public hearing. You get 3 minutes.
We tried to get the council to, when they did the More Housing Now, send a postcard to every home that was being, the zoning changed for it. That would just be 2,400 postcards. So easy for the county, and they wouldn't do it. So I think, maybe we should raise that question, as part of our legislative agenda, requiring a postcard to go to every homeowner when they're going to change.
Yes, I agree. They didn't do it for this plan either. There are a lot of
Zoning.
people that don't even know what's going on.
Or the use table, and people are going to suddenly find that they're next to townhouses or next to a parking lot and they didn't know what was going on. Liz Joyce, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to say that yes, indeed, the PHP hearing is online, and the reason that there was a problem is that they switched the time. But it's really important to zero in. I think I think we need a fact sheet on master plans and what has been happening in very recent time, because this is obviously all thought out in advance. And this is a plan that is predetermined, and there is little community input into it. And even if, as John says, even if they have hearings, often they don't listen. But it's really important. And I went to this is really interesting. I went to a forum recently with developers, and the representative from the council was Fanny Gonzalez. But anyway, after the meeting, it was Lurch, I forget the rest of the name of the company. I asked two of the developers, the lawyers for developers, are you opposed to master planning? And they said, absolutely not. We have no problem with it. In fact, to us, it represents a certain amount of vetting, and community contact has taken place, and it will be easier for us to go ahead with our plans. So some small group of influential developers, not represented by these people, is pushing this really very constituent unfriendly policy, which is very dishonest, being done in the dark, and it's much of a piece with everything that we've seen since. Just imagine, and as the county executive pointed out, Thrive 2030 had about 15 corridors, and the ZTA that was recently passed has 25. So they're adding corridors and they will add corridors as they please. So there's no set framework that everybody supposedly agrees on. And that's the kind of thing that I hope somebody will ask the candidates on, because they're all council members, on Saturday.
Yeah. Okay, so Linda, you have your hand up. Linda. Linda Nemick.
Yep, sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to let you know what Elrich has been talking quite a bit about the master plan being irrelevant. Also, we met with the planning department just because our association wanted to get a better handle on how everything fits together. It's sort of exactly what we're talking about. I did take notes, and so I'm happy to share those. It goes back to more housing now. But one thing that really struck me though when I was doing research is that the planning board that got in trouble for ethics, right? They're the ones that set the stage for all this sort of thing to happen. And you know, our rep, Natalie Fanning Gonzalez, she left about a year, before they got in trouble to run for county council. At that point, she had been on the planning department. And the fact that that happened, I mean, that was a big deal to have all those people get in trouble and resign. And then for whatever they figured out with the developers is still directing us. It just infuriates me. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. But I'm going to do more than learn about the information that that's being dribbled out to us.
Well, thanks for coming tonight and for joining the Civic Fed, and stay in touch with us because we all try to help each other as much as we can. John Holden.
Thanks, Cheryl. I wanted to actually read something from a message you sent this past July, early July. And you said, on the Politics Hour radio show that last Friday, Tom Sherwood asked Councilmember Natalie Fanny Gonzalez whether, quote, single-family zoning in Montgomery County is history. Her response was, not yet. And you said, I pass this on as a reminder of the importance of the debate we are having and how essential it is to have every voice. And I heard her say that as well on that show. The stakes are real, and
Yes.
it's relevant to the discussion that some people I think were having. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. I'd forgotten it. Anyone else? Oh, Liz, your hand up again.
And what Linda just pointed out, and Linda, please stay in touch with us, that she just discovered is absolutely the core of the problem. And I mentioned this at an event to former Attorney General Brian Frosch the other day, and I said, from what we had complained, the Civic Federation had complained a couple of years ago about this catastrophe where the whole board resigned, and it's important to note that they were forced to resign. People who had nothing to do with the scandal were also forced to resign and had major adjustments to make. Not only that, but many of the changes that they made were done against state law. The temporary board that they appointed was nowhere in state law. They just made it up and did it. And then were they to legally fire the entire planning board, there needed to be charges, notice, and a hearing for each member. And none of that happened. And the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, which operates independently, polices itself. So when we asked the Attorney General to help, he wrote us and said, I have no jurisdiction over the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and that runs the planning department in many important ways. So this it's actually a scandal that has been allowed to go into oblivion. And as Linda so very perceptively pointed out, the planning board that was fired for ethics violations set this course in action or this whole set of circumstances in action, and this council is making it worse. And this is where we are. I followed this carefully for 4 years, and it's scandalous. And this is what we're up against.
Okay, I don't see any more hands. Last chance. Someone wants to say something? We'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
moved. Second.
Seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say
Great.
nay.
Great meeting. Very, very good.
Meeting is
Thank you,
adjourned.
Joyce.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks.